Give it 1 minute. All right. Hello, everyone. This is Group 2. We're going to be talking about the Hanjin bankruptcy. And we're going to give you a little bit of a debrief on what it is, and then we'll kind of go through some discussion questions and wrap it up from there. So thanks for listening. We're really excited to connect with our classmates. So in August of 2016, Hanjin filed for bankruptcy because they're over $5 billion in debt. Hanjin was the 7th largest container line in the world, so pretty significant thing happening there because of their size. Pretty much what happened is they went bankrupt very quickly. So 85 containers were actually stranded at sea because ports were worried about not being paid if they were able to take the ships in and like unload all of their exports. So it definitely caused quite a stir in the global trading world. Creditors wouldn't bail out Hanjin, and there's some issues with the Korea Development Bank. Previously, back in 1999, there was some tax evasion issues that the bank actually had sued Hanjin over for over $445 million, like US dollars. So it was like actually pretty big. So pretty much what happened is that they were trying to get bailout money and it just didn't work out. So the resulting crisis is what we're going to be discussing today. And Hanjin had tried to propose a plan, and it was rejected. So in the end, this highly competitive environment plus not being able to get a bailout resulted in kind of a big crisis. So we're going to be discussing that today. So the first question we're going to talk about is what have been the global ramifications of the Hanjin bankruptcy, and how long will we feel these effects? So anyone want to jump in?
I can start.
Right.
So I think overcapacity in the shipping industry is going to be the problem, and the global trade is going to slow down tremendously due to this lower shipping rates, putting so much pressure on this shipping industry. And while some of the competitors are having this opportunity of Hanjin being weekly, so that is one of the impact. Other bigger and smaller shipping industry are having. The overall effect on industrial and retail real estate is likely to be negligible unless this issue spreads to more shipping companies.
Yeah, I think that's great. There's definitely an environment that doesn't seem to be awesome for the shipping companies right now. There seems to be like lower rates, so more demand over supply. So it seems like that's definitely not helping out.
Right. So I'm going to interject here too. So building on that, this overcapacity issue, it's not going away. I think it was reported back in June of 2018, 12 out of the 13 top carriers had actually increased their capacity in 2017. So while that supply demand and is increasing, this overcapacity issue is just getting worse. And it's actually really typical of these carriers to ignore their losses, which kind of, the bigger the problem gets, the harder it gets to be ignored later on. There was a Japanese carrier, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's either ONE or ONE. They actually just started in April of 2018, and within their first quarter, they experienced, I think it was close to $120 million of loss. And what I had been finding was that's pretty typical, and these companies tend to ignore that. And with the Hanjin case, that's kind of what we saw too. It just kind of built up over time, and it just kind of got out of hand. And it got to a point where no one would, bail them out or help them. And
I think ultimately, I'm sorry, Andrew, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Go ahead.
Okay. Ultimately, it seems like it's a combination of a highly competitive industry and inability to raise necessary capital. With the Korean government refusing to bail them out, in a part because of the government agency. The Korea Development Bank was one of its creditor that sued Hanjin.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
It raised the tension between the Hanjin and the creditors.
Yep. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think some of the new technologies, while it's supposed to be helpful for businesses to have new technologies, building these mega ships has increased this capacity beyond like demand. Like I believe it was that global trade's only growing at like 2.6%, and capacity is growing at like 8.6%. So like clearly capacity is growing way faster.
Yeah, I think capacity issues became more important in this one than increasing ocean freight, right?
Yeah, I think the excess capacity is making the shipping rates so cheap that people can't make money. Like that,
Right.
the shipping companies have issues. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that there was like really big impacts like right when it happened, but there is lasting effects because it shows that other shipping companies might be having problems as well. So I think it's interesting to kind of hear about the short-term effects of it. Like, you know, how do we figure out how to get these 87 ships cargo unloaded? Like that's the first problem. But then going forward, like how does this affect the shipping industry from now on? So yeah, those are all great pieces. Thanks for sharing. So then the next piece, next question we kind of wanted to talk about is, did your company feel any impact from this fallout? And if so, what happened and how was it resolved? And if there were ways to avoid this impact, like what should companies do to avoid it? And I'll just get us started just because Nike definitely was impacted where I work. Pretty much what happened is that there was some T-shirts from a Chinese supplier that were on ships, and it happened like in the end of August. So it was like right before we wanted to start building up inventory for the holidays. So it was interesting because it was very bad timing, and we pretty much had to scramble to get the shirts. Luckily, we did have pretty big leverage power, so we were able to like find our goods and be able to get them exported or imported here into the United States relatively quickly. And also, since Nike is such a huge company, like luckily we had other products that could kind of substitute, so it wasn't as big of a problem. But I think that it affected smaller companies even more, especially companies like with electronics and toys and things that were time sensitive, because then it just took months and months before they were able to like locate all the cargo and be able to like find places that would accept those ships. So I think specifically for Nike, it did affect us, but it wasn't as big as it could have been, just because we have tons of products. So luckily we could like, even though we didn't get these T-shirts specifically, we had other T-shirts that could kind of substitute.
Right.
So like even Intel didn't get so much impacted, but I'm sure many manufacturers get impacted if their one of the component or raw material got stuck in those ships, and then their whole manufacturing process got delayed due to just one component, and that disrupted their whole supply chain majorly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, for like smaller companies, who didn't really have the resources to recover their goods, I think they were definitely impacted more. Going through research, obviously larger companies did, even pulled money out of like personal accounts to help recover their inventory and all of their stuff. Like using trucking, air, other ships, kind of collecting that stuff. So it's really interesting to see how that worked.
Yeah.
As for me, quite frankly, I'm not sure if it did impact TriMet or not, but I would think, since Andrew mentioned that maybe it won't really impact the local companies as much as it does for the international companies.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And then kind of what are your thoughts on how companies can mitigate this kind of risk? Like, is it smart to work with multiple carriers? So if like one carrier goes, at least you have capacity elsewhere, kind of, or what are our thoughts? Like if we were to like give businesses like a recommendation, what are our thoughts?
I think personally, there is some merit to diversifying your carriers that you use. but also I think it's a real strong importance on the quality of that carrier. So kind of looking back a little further into like their history or trends of kind of how they handle different, risks and different potentially bad situations. So I think companies should really be more focused on, like the quality of getting their goods to them, as opposed to like maybe how long it would take.
Yeah, being like you can trust, like, okay, it's gonna get here on this day. Like you can trust that, even if it's like longer or short. It's more about reliability over like time.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Good point, Andrew.
And I don't think so that booking through any other cargoes or shippers would help, because what I have heard is um, due to this interlocking web of container ship alliance, where carrier members swap vessel slots all the time and move boxes accordingly, that's where their goods ended up causing shipment delays and backlogs, etc. So I'm not sure if even if they would have chosen some other shipments, it wouldn't have impacted. The damage caused by Hanjin's collapse could stretch well beyond its customer and partners to affect users of their liner companies.
Yeah.
The other business who were not even directly involved may never have thought of booking their cargoes directly through Hanjin vessels.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a great point, how the shipping industry is changing now because people aren't able to be as profitable. So now all these alliances and mergers are happening. And then pretty much kind of when that happens in an industry, like some of the less profitable businesses go out of business because that's just, survival of the fittest. So it's been interesting to see as shipping industries, as companies start to form alliances, is that going to become sort of like monopolies, and are they going to be able to control the price and actually raise the pricing of shipping rates? So that'll be interesting to see.
So,
yeah,
Right.
Good point.
I think better planning was the. It's good to have multiple carriers, but it's even better idea, just like you mentioned, the quality and better planning. It does need a better planning.
Sure.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. Yeah, thanks for sharing, guys. And then one more question. There have been many factors that contributed to Hanjin's demise. Some of, obviously, the 2008 financial crisis didn't help, as well as building of several mega ships, so like increasing the capacity on certain ships, as well as excess capacity. Do you think Hanjin could have recovered from that crisis? Were they simply not being responsive to like their issues, or do you think that this was kind of unavoidable, that certain companies that are not profitable are just going to kind of go out of business as things merge? Kind of wanted to see what your thoughts were on that.
I would think if they had a good planning, they would have probably covered if they planned it well for the next few years. But since they did not, and they kept building mega ships, and I think that's probably had a big impact on the company itself. So,
Yeah, and I think lack of support by creditors and banks, along with foreign governments aiding their own shipping lines, all contributed to Hanjin's troubles.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because they were sort of building these ships with like projections that foreign trade was going to keep growing at like the 8 to 10%, and then obviously China's economy slowed down and like global trade has slowed down, so it's almost like the supply and demand match just ended up not working out.
Yeah. No, I think. Sorry, Shanada.
Oh no, go ahead.
I think they were kind of poised for this fall. Whether or not they could recover from this, I don't think it was really any chance of that happening. Kind of one of those the last straw to break the camel's back kind of situations. Market forces were definitely against them, like you were saying, Jeanette. Chinese economy was really slowing down, and people really just kind of over projecting the demand for their services. Not to mention, obviously, the overcapacity and the extremely low ocean freight rates, kind of like a cutthroat situation. But you know, again, following a lot of these trends that these carriers really ignore these multi-million-dollar problems. I think they just didn't see this coming. And like to Shanada's point, you know, just poor planning was really, I mean, there was really no way to recover from this once it started falling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think an interesting fact that I saw too is that 25% of the world's containers capacities are literally just sitting empty, like like literally empty, sitting like boats that could be, you know, doing trade. 25%, which is just kind of nuts to me. Like
and
it's like
capacity is still growing too, so that number is still getting bigger.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm not sure.
Good point, Jeanette.
I was going to say, I'm not sure if they tried very hard was the government to bail them out. I mean, like usually government, when it looks at companies that big, they usually do something.
Yeah.
At least here in the States. So.
Yep. Most competitors I had found were actually their countries of origin were helping them out. That's why a lot of those were surviving through, especially this crisis and stuff. But I think the bad reputation. And the poor management on Hanjin's part, again, like that's like when their government was pretty much threw their hands up and said, sorry, you know, we're not going to help you anymore.
Yeah. All great points. Yeah. Great. Yeah. I think that really like covers it pretty well. I think there's definitely a lot of economy things that were happening. Definitely some government issues too. Yeah. Because like you were saying, like there were definitely other shipping companies where governments were helping to bail them out. So it seems like, unfortunately, if like Korea wasn't going to like put the money behind helping them out, I think that they were almost like, you know, doomed. So it's interesting. Yeah.
And I think ultimately it seems to be probably a combination of both a highly competitive industry it is, and probably an inability to raise necessary capital with the Korean government. Probably it could be the best guess of mine.
Yeah. Those are all great points. Awesome. Did anyone have any last minute points? Or, I mean, I think that does a really good job of kind of covering the main points here. Anyone else? Cool. Okay. Yeah, I think that really covers it. Thank you guys for participating. Like you guys gave a lot of great feedback, and I appreciate the work. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right, guys,
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you for taking it.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Take care.